To me, this policy hits very close to home because in my work as a developer, I'm very focused on taking old, dilapidated, outdated buildings and converting them. A lot of these buildings were built with really good material, especially industrial buildings. And there's no reason that we should let them fall into disrepair. There's just no reason that they should sit vacant while we're trying to build all this new housing. We actually have all of the square footage we need to meet all of our affordable housing demand already. It already exists. There's enough vacancy in the market today to meet the entirety of the affordable housing demand. It's true. The problem is it's located in some in office buildings, some in retail buildings, some in industrial buildings, some in vacant land. What we want to do is let the market perfect itself. Let the market find a nice equilibrium that matches the amount of housing to the amount of space. But right now, what government does through its own bureaucracy is it draws these walls in between product types. This is retail, this is office, this is industrial. Nothing can cross over without substantial effort and time and expense, etc. What we want to do is just break down all those barriers and say, just like anything in life, these things should all be fluid. Retail wants to be industrial, which wants to be office, which wants to be housing. Great. Make it happen. The biggest inhibitor in that is the number of housing codes and regulations which define housing as this very, 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 very specific thing. You need an outlet every 4 feet. You need a window every 18 feet. You need ADA access here, here, and here. You need Title 24 lighting that's compliant here, here, and here. You need all of these things that make housing production and speed come way down. So what we want to do is reduce the barriers. Say housing can be what people want it to be. And if people say, look, I'm willing to live in housing that doesn't have an outlet every 4 feet, especially in a world where phones can last 10 hours, where we don't plug that much stuff in all the time anymore. I'm willing to live in that environment. Give it to me. I'll live there. Better than not having anywhere. You know, so at what point do we say our regulations have become our own prison? At what point do we say all these codes that we've written for ourselves are hurting our ability to house people? And then we define today where we want the law to be. We don't have to be beholden to old rules, regulations. We can decide today what we want out of housing. And if that means we don't have to have an outlet every 4 feet, or if that means that we don't need to have a window here, here, and here, or if a sink doesn't need to be this wide and this tall and a mirror doesn't need to be here and here. I mean, the codes regulate to the smallest level. They tell you what kind of floor sealer you can put. I'm not kidding. That's real. When we built our cafe, we had to define exactly the brand of floor sealer we were going to use for concrete floors. Why? If you can't answer that question for every code that we have in housing, we should get rid of it. To me, that's easy. So I think by virtue of that bureaucracy reduction, that regulation reduction, we will get housing production at a speed that we really want it. And people will feel empowered to take all of this outdated space, unused space, and start just converting it to housing all over the city. And the great thing about that is, again, you're not going to have these islands of affordable housing. They're going to be super dynamic. So it'll be in an old office building here, an old retail center here, an old industrial building here. It will integrate the city. We don't want these density pockets, these islands that are so disparate from all the rest of the city. We want this whole thing to move as a city. We want it to be integrated. And the more housing goes into different areas, the more walkable the city will be, the more livable it will be, right? Because then you're adding density in a way that's manageable, that's sustainable, that doesn't add 4,000 units right here out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden you have these major traffic congestions right around this brand new dense development, right? And then to meet the demand of that dense development, inevitably, you're going to be getting Targets, places like Target, that can serve at that kind of dense scale. That's the kind of city that we're building with our current policy. What we want to do is decentralize the policy and allow housing production to move all over. That will be a much more effective and successful way of producing housing.